Okay, so I'd just like to welcome our guest on the show today, Ed from A Need to Read. He is a fellow podcaster. It's the first guest we've had that's actually got their own podcast. So welcome, Ed.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'm the first guest with a podcast. That's sick. So, yeah, buzzing to be here. Thank you.
Um, so that we can get to know you better and also the listeners, would you just like to explain what, because you're obviously going to explain it better than I would, what your podcast is about, like why you started it, how you ended up doing it, because you started yours the same year that we did. Like we ended up just doing it because of lockdown and we were on furlough and we just thought, why not? So, yeah, how come you started yours? What's yours about? And yeah, so listeners can get to know you a little bit better.
Okay, well, I'll start with why I started the podcast because I last year or maybe 2 years ago I got into reading, and it's something I hadn't done at all since school, and even then that was only like the odd paragraph that my English teacher would make me read. Sorry, and I was just telling everyone about it, all my friends, all my family members, and I could kind of tell that they were getting a little bit sick of it. And well, I was just saying off air then that in March time, just before lockdown hit, I was actually living in Australia. I went to Bali on holiday, and then Australia shut their borders on me, so I had to abandon my flat over in Bondi, which still pains me to say, and had to come home. And I was left obviously with no job, like loads of people. And I was like, why not just put it out on the internet, what I've got to say, and see who fancies listening? And the impact the books have had on my life, if I can potentially spread that to other people by just chatting shit about books. So sorry, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. All right. If I can just chat shit about books on the internet and people want to listen, then that is insane. And that's more than I ever would have hoped for. And I feel that a lot of the book reviewers that are out there come from a very like English literature masters, like further education background, whereas I haven't come from that. I dropped out of school / was asked to drop out of school midway through sixth form. So I've had no one tell me how to read or how to assess books. I feel there's a lot of people like me out there that don't really know about the narratives in books and stuff like that, and they just want to hear someone say whether it's good or not. So that was the idea behind it, and lockdown forced me to start it. And I mean, I'm one of the ones with something fortunate to come out of lockdown. I know everyone's kind of scared to say that Corona's forced them to
Yeah.
do something good, but I ain't scared, you know?
Yeah, because that's like us, Grace, as well, isn't it? Like we started our podcast in lockdown, and as well, we were saying that it's similar in a way that it's something we've always been interested in, but then you don't always want to go on about it because you just feel like slightly
No.
annoying to everyone. Yeah, we always say
Yeah.
that, don't we? So by doing a podcast, it's really nice because you can just talk about it all the time. And as well, that's really interesting that you only started like 2 years ago, because I like assume you just read books like your whole life.
Oh no, that's why I think I'm so excited about it, because it's a new thing for me. Like I've known that reading's a thing. I have always been able to read. I've just never been interested in actually sitting down and reading a book. I thought it was a waste of time, and I was so wrong. Like the stuff that I've learned from books and the improvements in my life since starting to read and like finding different things that I'm interested in, I struggle to put it into words, which is really annoying considering I've got a podcast and you've asked me the question. But yeah, it's not something I've always done.
So what was it that actually got you into reading books then? If you said that you only started 2 years ago and you weren't really engaged in it before, what was like the pivotal thing that got you into being so passionate about books?
I think like a lot of people around our age that get into the whole personal development thing is I just had a little bit of a meltdown, got a little bit depressed, and my life situation wasn't where I wanted it to be. So I was working in sales at the time. So I was like, right, well, I'll just read loads of sales books and loads of business books, and then I'll be a super salesman. And then I edged away from those kind of books into more like, right, sort your actual life out before you try and sort your job out. And from there, it just picked up and up and up, basically starting with a little bit of the old depresso.
Oh. What was the first book that you read then that when you were feeling depressed, what was the first book that you picked up that started to make you feel differently about your life?
Well, I mean, it's been a process, and I'm just about getting there now. But I started with the old cliche of Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson,
Yeah.
and it just made me rethink my whole entire life. The idea of like living a value-driven life and working out what your values are, and just really looking inwards as opposed to thinking like, oh, I'm going to be happy when I get this or get that. It's just living by what I find is important in my life. So I listened to that to begin with, and I must have listened to it like 4 or 5 times because I just kept going back to it every time I needed a reset because I wasn't quite doing all the work I needed to actually get better. But I just, Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. I think it's actually less popular than I'd imagined. I thought everyone absolutely loved it, but I've since worked out that it's about 50-50. But yeah, it's a brilliant book and it'll make you reassess everything.
I've heard a lot about that book, but I've not actually read it.
Yeah, me too. Maybe we should read it. But we were also discussing the way that you break down like the amount of time it takes to read a book is like mind blowing because it really makes you think like we do spend like so much time on social media and all that time like you could easily be putting that into reading a book.
It's mad. I literally had 7 hours screen time yesterday and I hate that I had that, but I still managed to read half a book.
Oh my
And I watched a
God.
film as well. And people think that like it takes up so much time, but when you think about the average book, it's about a page a minute, and then the amount of pages in the average book. Let's push it to the higher end of the scale and say it's like 300. That's what 300 minutes, which is 5 hours, hour a day. Or if you split it over like 2 weeks, you literally have to do 20 minutes a day and you finished a book. And people don't start because they think it's such a daunting thing. But if you just pick up the book to begin with, all of a sudden it's in your hands and it's a lot easier than when it was not in your hands, if you know what I mean. And it's really simple, but that is what it is. It is really simple.
It's all about how you prioritize, isn't it? Because I think it's so easy to just pick up your phone. Like I'm quite bad when I get in bed. Like I'm like, oh, I should definitely read now. But then I just pick up my phone instead. But I definitely like I'm gonna really work on the habit of like reading instead because I always feel like so much calmer when I'm like in a good routine of reading.
Yeah. There's a couple ways in which you can do that. And one thing I try to do, I got in a really good habit of just having my phone out of my room, almost as if like you're treating your phone as if it's the enemy, even though it's not, because it's great because it gets you connecting to all these people, but it does take away from like your connection to yourself a little bit sometimes. So if you sleep with your phone out the room, like I paid £6 for like a Casio alarm clock, and that was the best £6 I've ever spent because I'm not, the first thing I pick up in the morning isn't my phone. My phone's out of my room and I can get up, meditate, and then read, and then go and let the flood of information that's on my phone into my brain. But I get to control that first like half an hour of my day because my phone's just not in my room.
Yeah, and that's such a good thing to do because so many people literally you just automatically pick it up because it is your alarm. Then you're like, oh, I've got these notifications. You look at that. You might see something that pisses you off and your day has already started on like a bit of like a negative vibe. Whereas just, using an alarm clock, putting your phone on like airplane mode, keeping it in a drawer. Like I started doing that recently in the mornings. And then you have that time to yourself to like kind of get your mindset to where you want it to be for the day. And it really is like, I'd say life changing, like, because it just makes you experience like your day is so much more different than if you're waking up and feeling like you're being sucked into your phone already and what everybody on there is telling you and asking you to do.
Yeah, honestly, because like one thing I always try to remind people is like they're not that important, and that it's something that people struggle to come to terms with. But like no one really needs you. Like when was the last time any of your friends got like kidnapped and they needed to like speak to you? Like it is an anomaly, isn't it? It doesn't happen often. I've never had it personally.
No, that's so true. I definitely need to buy like a new alarm clock that works, because I actually did buy one, but then it didn't work, so I ended up not using it. But I feel like that's a really good thing, to just put your phone outside of the room so you don't even grab it.
Definitely. And then like in that morning time, if you read for 15 minutes every morning, like I'll go on to reading getting a habit of reading. I know you didn't ask, but I'll go for it anyway. If you say like, I'm not going to clean my teeth in the morning until I've read for 15 minutes, it's called habit stacking. It comes from a book called Atomic Habits by
I've heard of
James
that.
Clear. And you got to make it attractive. So the attractive thing about having to read before you clean your teeth is once you've read, you can then have nice breath for the rest of the day, or for most of the day, until you eat something that's going to change that. But it's just a really simple one. Like 15 minutes in the morning is nothing. It's literally 1% of your day. And within 3 weeks, you probably finished a book by just dedicating 1% of your time to it.
Yeah, I feel like we put off reading books because we look at them like, especially if it's quite a big book, and you just think, oh my God, that's huge. That's going to take me so long to read it. But the way you break it down, like a page takes like a minute of your time to read. There's 300 pages in this book. That's like average like 5 hours of my time to read that. Then like if you think about social media, if you actually check your screen time, like how much time you spend on like Instagram and stuff, it's a horrible amount of time. But if you like we're approaching Instagram like, oh, I'm going to spend an hour of this or 2 hours of my time looking at this today and then doing that every day for the rest of the week. That's a huge amount of time you would, you know what I mean? Like, we're humans, we put things off, we think it's a big task, but then like with social media, we don't realize how much time we're going to spend on it. Cause we're kind of like mindlessly like scrolling it and just get sucked into it. You don't even, you're like unconsciously using it. You're not using it like with a lot of like self-control. Whereas with a book, you like put it off because you think this is going to take me a long time. But the way you break it down, it makes it seem like so like doable. And you know, there's some people like, oh yeah, I'm trying to read a book a month this year, and you just think, wow, that how are you doing that? But actually, when you break it down like that, it sounds very easy to do, and it's a much better use of your time.
Yeah, definitely. It's mental. Like when I started this year, I'd written down that I wanted to read 26 books over the year. So I'd written it down. I was like, right, well, 26 books over the year. That's one every 2 weeks. I was like, that's 20 minutes a day. So like the breakdown I did, I actually wrote that down because I never set myself goals because I always had this fear of failure. So I didn't do any like New Year's resolutions or anything like that. And this year was the first year that I did that. And I thought like the most important thing for me to do, as opposed to just writing down this like sentence of what I want to achieve, is just like how to get there. Because then once you break it down small, it's like, remember like BBC Bite Size?
Yeah.
Like it's such good concept. If you break everything down into like bite-sized chunks, everything just seems so much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. You also touched there on meditation. So like Grace and I are always banging on about how much we love meditation. But what do you do? Do you meditate every day? And do you feel like how has that changed your life since compared to when you didn't used to meditate?
So meditation for me is something that I hit my 199th day in a row today. I'm just
Whoa.
ready
That
for
is
that
so
200.
good.
I'm so buzzing with it because like it's just nice to see that I've stuck to something regardless of what's
Yeah.
happened to me the day before or like through the night. Like I've done it every morning. And it creates space between like stimulus and response. So if something happens to me, someone says something, whereas I used to be quite a reactive person, I can now respond as opposed to react. So I can take time to be like, oh, did they mean that? Was that meant to be offensive? Let's say it's on that line of thought. I get to choose then how I can respond because there's a bit more of a space in my mind, and also my creativity has shot up since I've started to meditate. Like I started about February last year, and I did like a 50-day course. So I think I've almost done 100 hours now,
Oh God.
like in total. But they say that you're not like a master meditator until you've done like 10,000 hours. So they say after your 100 hours, that's when you start to really feel a difference. And after about 500, you really like you hardly react to a thing. And I'm just waiting for that day when I've meditated so much that I don't feel anything that I don't want to feel. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's such a good practice to get into. And honestly, 3 years ago, if someone was like, "Oh, meditate," I'm like, "Shut up, mate. That's for losers." Like, and I couldn't have been more wrong.
What do you use like to meditate? Do you just do it by yourself with just music, or do you do it guided?
Purely because of the streak that I'm on, I use Headspace because
Yeah.
it tells you how many days you've done in a row, and I like that as like a tracking method. But I also use Waking Up by Sam Harris, which is an app, and that's a little bit more like in-depth meditation. So I'll probably do that like every other day, in addition to the Headspace stuff. But one thing that really frustrates me about like meditation is people see like an app costs them like 40 or 50 pounds for the year, and they're really reluctant to spend that money on it. But cost per use, if you're using it every day over the year, I'm not going to do the maths on that, but it's so cheap for the benefits you can get from it when you think like a double G&T is like 8 or 9 quid.
That is so true. I absolutely love Headspace. That's like the first app I ever used, and that literally got me into meditating.
What do you guys do for meditation? How much do you meditate?
I've been doing it every day recently. I go through peaks and troughs with it, but recently I've been doing it every day consistently. But I use Insight Timer, or Jay Shetty he did like loads of Instagram lives during quarantine, then also recently when he just released his new book, and
Oh, yeah.
somebody's recorded all of those meditations he did like 20 days worth and then another 20 days worth, and just put them on YouTube. So I just go and do those, or do something from YouTube. I used to use Headspace, but now I started to just not vibe with it. I wanted something else, because it's that same guy's voice. I just felt
Yeah.
like I wasn't.
I love his voice.
Yeah,
I love his voice as well.
Good on Andy.
yeah. So I just use little random things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like it keeps it varied, and I suppose like when you go on YouTube, they have all those different types of meditations, don't they? They've got like your visualization one, stuff like that. Whereas, like obviously on Headspace, you're quite confined to the courses that they have. But some of the courses on there, like the happiness course on there, and there was another course that used visualization. And I genuinely think that changed my life. Like just being able to visualize like a little beam of sunlight starting in your chest and expanding to like take over the whole world. It was mad. I used to leave those feeling like I'd just done like a massive bong or something.
Yeah, it is such a powerful practice. It really does like shift your state of being, and then when you're doing it consistently, like you do become a very different person.
Definitely.
Yeah,
It's,
I remember I said to you, Grace, about that. I think it's called a managing anxiety on the Headspace. And I have never looked like at anxiety in such a different way. Like those Headspace ones are designed really, really well. So if anyone is listening, they don't know where to start, like 100% recommend Headspace.
yeah, because you can get a free trial as well. And then if you don't pay for it and you don't see the value in it, then you need to reassess your priorities.
True. So you were saying that you'd moved to Australia, and obviously you're about to go to Bali. You sound like you live your life in quite a
Impulsive.
yeah, and like taking quite big risks to go and move to the other side of the world. I'm assuming by yourself. Have you always been like that, or is that something that you've recently become a part of the person that you are through, where you started to read books, started meditating, you just changed how you saw things, or have you always been like that?
I think I've always loved travel. Like when I was growing up, like we didn't have like Sky TV or stuff like that in the house. All the money that probably came into the house from my parents, like we went on holidays in the summer and stuff like that, as opposed to buying like nice things in the house. So I've always loved traveling and getting out. And then I just had various girlfriends in the past that I'd have gone away with and not really fully enjoyed my time because I'm such a people pleaser, or I used to be, that I just focus on them having a good time instead of me. And then I decided that I wanted to go to places alone. So I went like skiing for a week on my own once and just stayed at like one of my mum's friends' chalets. And I was like, do you know what? I really like this because I'm completely on my terms and I'm quite an introvert, which people don't really expect from me. So I just love being on my own. And Australia was somewhere that I'd planned to go for a while. And then my grandma got ill and I got into another relationship. So I put it off and I went out there for 3 weeks on my own as opposed to moving out there. And I absolutely loved it. But I knew that I needed to be there for longer. And I decided like, oh, I definitely want to live there. So I was meant to go September last year, was with my ex then still. So I didn't go. I postponed it until the new year. And then my ex broke up with me last year, which is probably the start of like a massive change for me in terms of like where I put my energy. And then I moved to Australia in the January. But before that, I just flew to Bali like 2 or 3 days after my ex broke up with me. Because I was like, I'm either going to stay here and probably come knocking on her door asking to like get back with me, or I can just get out the country. And then there's no way that I can do that. And I went to Bali for 2 weeks, had such a good time. Like I wasn't like going out and boozing all the time. I was just doing jiu-jitsu, surfing, really taking time to just like sit with my own shit, as it were, and like work out what I wanted. And then solo travel just seemed to be the thing. So I went to Australia, absolutely loved it, made some of the best friends I've ever made in my life. Because I think what people usually do, like I didn't go to university or anything, so I didn't manage to get out of my bubble, you know, like from when you're in school.
Yeah.
People go to uni, they find like their friends that they're going to be friends with forever. I hadn't done that. So I hadn't had a chance to go somewhere and be who I always wanted to be, which is obviously who you are, if you know what I mean. And yeah, I just absolutely loved it. And I'm very, very impulsive. So like when I was in Australia, like if it was raining somewhere, I literally just booked a flight and flew to the other side. And every decision that I've made on a whim that I've like decided to do a turnaround in like 2 or 3 days just so happens to be like right up in the top 10 best decisions of my life. So I've always been pretty impulsive, and I've just decided this year I'm just going to play to my strengths and just be impulsive forever. Because people always try and say, oh, don't be impulsive, but I'm loving it. I'm going to keep doing it.
Oh, I love that. It sounds like a very fun way to live your life.
Yeah, it's definitely fun. Is at like the center of my values, is just doing things that you enjoy.
So with like the podcast and kind of like where it's going, so you're going to like take that to Bali, and do you have like a plan for the future with that?
Yeah, today I'm actually going to do myself a little mind map of all the things that I want to do with it over maybe like the next 6 months. Because when I'm in Bali, I've got total freedom to just concentrate on it. And like the parts of my day that I'm going to do there, I'll get up in the morning, I'll do my normal morning routine. I'll probably go for breakfast. I'll then go to jiu-jitsu, which will take up an hour and a half. And then I might surf in the afternoon. I've got the whole day just to like read, focus on things for the podcast, and work out how to make it like something that I can sustain a living off, because I don't want to work for anyone else. I'm basically giving myself a timeline of like by the end of that 6 months, I want to be taking in like $1,000 a month so that I could then survive in somewhere like Bali until I can then make more money to then survive somewhere else. But basically focus the whole time on the podcast and trying to spread word that people can just change their lives if they start to read, because that's the most important thing. Like I get messages all the time now like, oh my God, you've got me back into reading. I've made this decision since doing it. I would never have done that without your podcast. I'm like, look, don't give me credit. Like it's purely the books that you're reading, but that is sick.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That sounds really fun. I'm a bit jealous.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Can we just
You
go
don't
to
need
Bali?
much money to survive in Bali, honestly. Like I'm going out there with like 2 or 3 grand.
Really? And that'll be
Yeah.
fine. Well, I've never
Yeah, it
been
should
there,
be.
so I don't know like how cheap it is, but I like how you're going on this 6-month visa and you're like, well, I've got to make this work. I've got to make a living off this podcast, or you know, you're going to have to then do something else or whatever. I feel like sometimes when you put yourself in a situation where you're like your back's kind of against the wall and you've got no other option other than to make this work and do whatever it is you want to do, you can't like procrastinate on it or anything. Like you've got no choice but to make it work. And I think that sometimes is like the most effective positions to put yourself in life. So I think when you're a bit too comfortable, you end up like, you know, coasting a bit and then not really, you know, going after what you want or like making something work. So it sounds very fun.
Yeah. And honestly, it's the whole sink or swim thing. Like, I really, really, really don't want to work for someone ever again. I'm not unemployable, but my attitude stinks when people tell me what to do. So like by choice, I'm unemployable. Like when I had a job in Australia for all of 2 hours, and I started work at Fitness First. Shout out to them and their stupid manager in Sydney. He basically was like, "Oh, if you need to go to the toilet, just put your hand up and ask." And I was like, "Oh, don't worry about it, mate." And he was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Well, I just won't work here if you're going to make me ask to go to the toilet." And it's not that I knew that I could get something else. I just thought, I'll just take that risk because I'm not going to be working somewhere where someone's going to tell me to do something that is childish. Do you know what I mean? Like I'd much prefer to be faced like in that sink or swim situation. So like the day after that, I booked my barista course and then printed out a CV and went and handed it to loads of cafes in Bondi, and then obviously went to Bali and had to come home. But when you're faced with like that kind of adversity, like, oh, this isn't going to work out, or you really need to do something, it's a real test of character, and you'll surprise yourself with like what you do. Like with I can't remember who it was I was speaking to at the start, and I'm really sorry about that, but like being made redundant at like recently, like you're faced with the decision now of like, right, what do I want to do? How am I going to do it? And like, what's the option if I don't do anything? And you'll work that out. And I don't doubt that like something amazing will come from it, because like if you look at what you've built from nothing at the start of lockdown to like what you've got now, you could monetize off this podcast in a year and neither of you would probably have to work. You could live somewhere relatively cheap and like within your means, or you can find something else that works with like social media, because you know how to grow social media, you know what content people like, and like what would you rate your like social media knowledge out of 10?
I feel like we're pretty good now.
Yeah.
What would you say?
On Instagram, we're pretty knowledgeable on Instagram now.
Okay, give it a number.
I'm going to go for a 9.
See? Do you know how many old people are out there that haven't got a fucking clue about it that would pay you for that 9?
Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah, it's very
true.
inspiring.
Easy to land clients because honestly, they just don't know. They need someone to tell them what to do to help them grow their business. Like Pepper Army, I know a girl who does some of the social media for them. They grew their Instagram following by like 2,000 in like 3 months. Bearing in mind, like Pepper Army is such an established business, and they're celebrating that. I'm like, that blows my mind. If I'm running an account like Pepper Army, I want them to be like growing by 100,000.
Yeah, that's very true. Wow, inspiring.
There's your tips.
Yeah, it's a little pep talk.
So our podcast mainly focuses on like mindfulness, wellness, self-love, just generally positivity and finding your feet, just getting to know you, becoming more of like your true authentic self in life. So have you got like a book recommendation that for people that listen to our podcast that are obviously engaged in all those things I've just said?
I think a really lovely book to read when you're trying to figure out like what you want to do is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And it follows like a young shepherd boy. And I don't know when it's set in terms of years, but he's in Spain and he ends up like having a dream about some treasure by the pyramids in Egypt. And it just follows his journey from being a shepherd to then like traveling. So I loved it because it's the travel element. And there's loads of different bits along the way about how you're heading in one direction in life and you're then put off course, but you can really make the most of that and like really make the most of your time when you're going off course and not really worrying about it. And it's relatively spiritual. It's relatively woo-woo. So like, I like it for that. I imagine from what you've said about what the podcast is like people will like it because of that.
Yeah.
And it's just such a nice book to read because the shepherd boy's like dad at the start wanted him to be like a baker or a merchant so that he could stay in his hometown. But he was like, nah, like my value is travel. So I'm going to take a really like a not very well paid job, a job where I'll have to sleep outside, but I'll get to like follow my dreams and my values by traveling with all my sheep. And I think it's just such a nice story because I think a lot of people end up just doing what their parents want them to do, when in reality it's like our parents, they just grew up in a completely different time. Like
Yeah,
the generational difference
true.
between like our parents and us is so mad.
Yeah, because that's when the internet came, and that's just completely changed the job landscape, how businesses work. Being able to do like a podcast and just do it from home and just build it from nothing. Like there's all these different opportunities that we have now that they never had. So it is just such a different world. That's very true. Well, thank you for the recommendation. I've not
That's
actually
cool.
read that
I'm
book, but I've heard a lot about it.
Well, I actually have that book and I did start reading it and I really, really liked it. But then I got distracted by Florence Given's book because I had it on pre-order. So then I started reading that. But I'm definitely going to go back and finish that because I think I've read about half of it and I was really, really enjoying it. But you know when you get too excited about another book and then you start the other one?
Yeah, the old Florence
always do
Given
that.
book. I'm yet to read it. People keep telling me to read it, but I've almost heard enough about it to feel like I've already read it.
It's so good. I bang on about it all the time.
She's she's doing brilliant things.
Yeah.
I don't want to put my foot in my mouth here because I am a feminist. Like I've grown up in like a really like my mum's always been the breadwinner. My sister's done like insane things for like women in business since she's like graduated uni. She basically marched straight into her boardroom. It was like, there's no women in here. You need to like pull your finger out and get your act together. So like I've always been like gassing up all the women in my family. And you'll probably see like from the guests that I've had on my podcast, like I click more with females than I do with males. But Florence Given is fucking aggressive.
Yeah, she is.
And I really want to speak to her. I think that would be such a
brilliant.
fascinating like conversation.
Yeah, it would be, especially for her age. That like I'm not much older than her anyway, but I think she put on her Instagram the other night that she's 22 next week, and I don't know why, but she just seems so much older.
Yeah, it's actually
it's
mad.
mad.
Her like how she's got such a strong sense of self and like believes so much in what she thinks. Like she's like really confidently, obviously through that book and everything, asserts herself. And for how young she is, it's like it's crazy.
It's good to be that pragmatic. Like I always say that about I don't care what the author's writing about, as long as they back themselves, like that's good enough for me.
Yeah. And people like listen to people that have that confidence and believe in themselves. Like if you approach anything in life and you're a bit like and you don't fully back yourself, then no one's really going to take you seriously or listen to what you have to say. So
yeah, and it's an awkward thing for men to speak about, like stuff that Florence Given talks about, because like as men, like I'm under no illusion that I've got it fucking easy because I'm a white middle class male. I've never had a period in my life. I will never know what it's like to be a woman. So like it's a conversation that I don't try to avoid it because I think it's good to have those conversations because I think there's a lot of blokes that don't understand that side of it. So I'm trying to like spread that message, but yeah, fair play to her because she knows the message that she wants to get across and she is aggressive with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're doing a great job as well with like, especially raising the awareness for like men's mental health, or even like talking about feminism and stuff like that. Because I think so many men do kind of shy away from it or don't even know where to start. But
Mm.
Florence always says as well with her book, she's like, everyone should read this, including men, or if anything, more
Yeah.
men.
Yeah, it is like, do you know what? I need to whack it on my wrist, but I whack myself on the wrist and then I'll read it by the end of the year. I'll get it on the list.
So before you were saying that you obviously struggled with depression, and that's kind of what then you started turning to books and moving forward with your life by just taking a bit more ownership for like your mindset and stuff. And the way that you speak about it is very I don't know, there's no shame, like not that there should be any shame around it, but you have like no shame in how you speak about it. And I mean, from like a guy saying that, it's quite refreshing and unique. And I do think that's a little bit why your podcast has been obviously done really well, is that you have that side to you where you just kind of like unapologetically speak and be yourself and be open about like sort of like taboo subjects that other guys would be nervous to speak about.
Yeah.
And where you were saying before, you really get on with girls, like I feel like you very much lean into like your feminine energy. I don't mean that like a
Yeah.
weird
No,
way,
no,
but
no, no,
yeah,
no.
we've
I
all got
understand,
like
though. It's cool.
we've got a mix of both. So you're quite like I feel like there's not actually that many, or that I've come across anyway, guys that sort of see life in the way that you do and approach it in the way that you do. So within like your, I don't know, in your own friendship circles and the other guys in your life, are you encouraging them to be more open about their mental health? Like, have you, from you being this way, is it, I don't know, what does it do? Has it done anything in like I don't know, have you got many male listeners, or I just feel like it's something that a lot of girls are really open about, but guys
Yeah.
don't tend to be much. I don't know if it's like a pride thing or what, but so you just being that way, it makes I'm sure it makes a lot of other guys feel like they can be open in that way as well, because you're positively received for it. But just what are your thoughts on that?
Well, like for me, over the last year, like my friendship groups have changed. Purely because I just felt like I wasn't fitting into the whole like lad culture thing. If you know what I mean, I hate lad culture. I don't belong to any lads WhatsApp groups purely because I just think they're toxic places that just shouldn't exist. And maybe that's just goes to show like my poor choices of people to be around. And no offense to the people that I used to hang around with, like none of them are going to listen anyway. But just in case they do, like I still think you're all right. But boys don't want to talk about things like being upset when a relationship ends. Like when a girl breaks up with someone, the first thing that happens is all their friends gather around them and they just like they love each other. Like girl friends love each other. Guy friends are afraid of the word love, which is bizarre to me. But I have a few friends that, and like these are the best type of friends that I can say to them like, hey, how's your mental health? Like not just how are you, like how's your mental health? And then they'll say like, oh, like it's been all right, but this has been bugging me. And those are really like empowering conversations to have, to be able to say to them like, oh, how's your mental health? They go, oh, it's X or Y. And I feel the more open and honest I am, like people might be like, oh, Ed's talking about his mental health again. Like I don't really care about any of that, because if someone's saying that, I don't want to be their friend. I don't want to be friends with people that want to like shut people down for talking about their feelings. So like if I can encourage someone by maybe opening up more than people would consider normal, so they can then open up a little bit that they might not have before, that's really empowering as well, because like that could potentially save someone's life. Like it's no secret there are so many like people killing themselves nowadays, and I think it's like 75% of suicides are men. It's the biggest killer of people before 40. Like I don't want to be that statistic. I don't want to have any friends that are that statistic. And with my platform, if I can reach out to like more people in the general public I could hopefully inspire that onto them, so they would have those conversations with their friends. Like that's really, really important, because suicide's like preventable. I've not dealt with that like in my life. I've not got to a point where I felt like I didn't want to live anymore, and I don't know anyone that actually took their own life. But I know of about 5 people in the last year, like disconnected by one or two connections that have taken their own lives. And I just think that's so sad, because everyone has that point when they're asked that question of how are they, when maybe they're not so good and their chest sort of tightens up and they're on that tipping point of saying, oh, I'm not so good, but they shy away from it and they keep it in, and then it eats up on them, and then it starts eating at their character. And then a few months down the line, potentially, like, you've just lost a friend because people didn't feel comfortable enough to open up. And I never want to be someone that's doesn't allow people to be comfortable around them and encourage them to open up, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And plus, reading's helped me so much. Like, there are books that people can read for their mental health. Like, if you're struggling like anxiety, depression, like, there's a book called The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris. I have therapy, so I go to ACT therapy, which is like acceptance and commitment. And this book is based on ACT therapy, and it is fantastic. And it just goes into all the stories that you tell yourself, because a lot of the time, like, I know I'm waffling on here, but like, one of the biggest stories I used to tell myself was that I was a failure, because like, I left school too early. I then failed the Marines. I failed in a couple jobs. I tried to be a stock trader, didn't do that. Like, there's so many things in my life that, like, objectively I failed, but I then attached that to my identity, that I was a failure, when really that is just a story. So one thing, like a bit of advice I'd give to people is, like, if you recognize this same feeling coming up a lot of the time, name that story and then just set a notification on your phone every day for that to come in until you realize that that is a story. So at 12 o'clock every day for about 3 months, I just had I'm a failure just pop up on my phone. And like, first couple of weeks, I was like, oh, that's funny. And then by the end of it, I was like, oh my God, what? Like, I can't believe I ever thought that about myself, because that's totally false.
Yeah. I've never heard of anybody like setting a notification on their
No, me
phone
too.
to do that, to get rid of like a limiting belief.
I've done it so many times. I've still got a few coming now, like every Friday, just to remind me, I'm like, the podcast is a good idea. Like, that comes in every Friday.
Oh my God.
Another one I have is teacher one or teacher two. So like, teacher one, they both live in my head, but teacher one is really aggressive. It was like, Ed, you're not doing enough. You need to do more for the podcast. Like, you're not good enough at this. And then teacher two is like, Ed, like, you've done great. Look how far you've come. Like, look where you were last year. You're doing really well. Keep it up and do what you can. So I just got to recognize, like, when teacher two's showing up, I'm like, oh yeah, we don't like you, bro. Get out.
I love that. I think I need
Yeah,
to start
that's
doing
so
this
interesting.
notification thing.
It's great.
Yeah, we need to start
There's
doing that,
loads of
Grace.
tips and tricks in that book. Like, you know, when people are, so like, in last year, the girlfriend that I had at the time, she cheated on me, and I spent so much time thinking about the particular scenario, like really trying to get into details. And of course, I would never have known what actually happened past what I was told. But your mind plays so many tricks, and it wants to make this like drama in your head. But if you change the characters from those two people that you're thinking about to like Shrek and Fiona, you realize it's just a thought and it can't hurt you.
Wow, I love that.
Oh.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
That you like, because your brain can do that. You just change it to a cartoon character. Oh, look, it's no longer real. And it's difficult and it takes time. But like, I can think about that now and not bat an eyelid. You just have to be willing to like put in the work to like be uncomfortable and think about those things to begin with. But then after a while, that anxiety or like that hurt is gone.
Wow.
That's so interesting. I feel like so
So
many
many-
good tips.
Yeah, amazing tips. And yeah, thanks for being so like open about your own mental health. Like, even then, just mentioning that you go to therapy. Like, some people are like, I could never say that, even though there's no shame in it. I think that actually, if you're going to therapy, that's like you're lucky that you can afford that. Like, everybody needs it, and yeah, so it's just so good that you have like that outlook and that you put that through into your podcast. It will massively impact so many people. I think like one of the things, like what you were saying about suicide, I feel like this year as well, obviously it takes them quite a while to add up how many people have actually done it year on year. Like, the statistics are always delayed when they come out, because
They'll put it down as COVID as well. Like,
yeah, but how many people are gonna, have potentially ended their life this year because they've been stuck inside and you've got none of the external stimulation distractions that you normally had, whether that was like going out to the pub with your friends and drinking away your feelings or anything. Like the only thing you can really like numb yourself out with at the minute now is like Netflix or social media and things like that. There's not as many distractions. You're not around as many as people either, so you're kind of just left alone with your own thoughts. I think so many people that didn't already have like a great mindset, their mind wasn't a great place to be, will have just found this year so difficult. And I don't know, I think there's going to be like definitely an increase in suicides this year, but it's nice to hear you speak about men's mental health in that way, and I feel like you don't speak about it in a very serious way either, so you just make people feel like, yeah, it's okay, like just put this notification on your phone, like you make it a bit, I don't know, fun, if you could say it's fun. But
I think it just needs to become a casual thing to talk about, because like if you break your arm, I'd be like, oh, sorry to hear about your arm. If I said to someone that I was depressed, they might like recoil and feel a bit like nervous that I've just said that, whereas it's just a weird disparity between like mental and physical health, when the one that affects most people is the mental stuff. Like everyone has those days, and it's just how long you let those days last. And I'm not saying that you can like positive think yourself out of a situation, like it does really take work, but the more casually you can talk about stuff like that, like the better, because someone listening might be like, oh my God, I think the exact same as that guy, or like those guys think the same as me.
Yeah, that's why I love it when people are very open and honest on podcasts, because it's like, it's a real person behind the microphone, and when you listen to a podcast, you kind of feel like you're in the conversation. And when people are being like open and honest, it just like kind of makes that person feel like they could then go out in their own life and have that same approach, and then maybe feel more comfortable to like speak to someone about how they're feeling if they're not feeling that great, because they feel a bit more like normal, like it's a bit more, they feel a bit more normal about what they might have thought was really abnormal if they are in like what you were saying before, where you had not a great friendship circle that never like facilitated the space for you to say how you actually felt. Like there'll be a lot of people in that situation, but
I think I didn't let them facilitate that space as well. I think like it's your vibe attracts your tribe, and I just was a bit of a prick.
That is very true. I was going to say there as well. Yeah, I think it's really beautiful the way you explained about suicide and stuff as well, because that is like the main reasons I can see from you and from Grace and I as well why we started the podcast. That I feel like we shouldn't accept the fact that people are just killing themselves. Like it shouldn't just become normal. Like it literally pains me that just has just become a thing. Like I think by all three of us now, like we are working on that stigma, talking about mental health and working on breaking that stigma and like talking about mental health. And like I just think that is so important.
Yeah, definitely. Like we're all doing our bit. It's the Lord's work, apparently.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of our episode. So this is when we always share the quote of the week with the listeners, but when we have a guest on, we always ask them to share what their favorite quote is. So what is your favorite quote and why do you love it?
Okay, so this is from a book that I haven't actually finished reading yet, and I started it in about April. It's A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. It's like a classic novel set in like a dystopian future, which is apparently getting all too real with what's going on at the moment. But at the start of the book, and I'm going to read it to you because my favourite part of it is rolling in the muck is not the best way of getting clean. But to expand it, he says, if you've behaved badly, repent and make amends for what you can and adjust yourself to the task of behaving better next time. On no account brood over your wrongdoing. Rolling in the muck is not the best way of getting clean. And I think everyone does stuff that they're not proud of, and it's part and parcel of life. But you don't have to give yourself a hard time. Like the only thing you can focus on is just doing better. So like rolling in the muck is not the best way of getting clean. And I just think there's such a smart but like simple way of saying like just try not to think about it, just do better.
Yeah, I love that. Because I feel like we judge ourselves so much all the time, then especially when we do actually make mistakes and do things and we don't let ourselves move on from it. And even if the other person is like forgiven you or whatever. So yeah, I love that. Thank you very much for sharing.
You're welcome. What are your ones?
Oh, my
What
favourite quote.
I know. What's
God,
you? Do you do quote of the week or no?
Oh no, we usually just have to guess, but
sorry, put you on the spot. What's your favourite one though?
in general, oh my God, I don't know. I think I'd have to have a think about it.
Live, laugh, love.
Oh God.
No, all those old ones. I don't even know if I come back to you.
All right.
Yeah, we've never been put on the spot and been.
Yeah, I know. Now we know how it
I'm
feels. I have so
I'm
many.
here to ruffle feathers.
Yeah, I like quite like a long one that gets you like really in the feels.
Oh yeah,
But
nice.
I'd have to have a think about it.
Well, come back to me. Send it to me later. I'm looking forward to it.
You failed there. Was that one?
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Ed. It's been lovely to chat to you, and I'm sure that everyone will have really enjoyed this convo as well.
No, it's great to connect. Thank you very much for having me on. It's nice to have a little chat on a Monday, considering we're all stuck inside.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and I feel so inspired now. I'm going to go read my book.
Yeah, and start a business, social media business.
Yeah, so many ideas.